All right, it seems like we have a few students that are getting logged in. I'll give it just a couple more seconds and then we'll get things kicked off. All right, just because I want to give the panelists plenty of time to get through their content, I will kick things off. My name is Isabel and I am just facilitating and keeping everything on time tonight. So a couple of things you'll notice, and I am sharing a slide with some reminders for the meeting tonight. You can ask questions via the Q&A, and please ask questions. These folks are here as a resource for all of you, so please use that Q&A button. Your camera and microphone are off, so this is kind of webinar structure, and so you are muted and the panelists cannot see or hear you, but again, take advantage of that Q&A feature to submit any questions or comments. This is one of many sessions offered by IACAC over the next few weeks. So at iacac.org you can sign up for additional sessions, and there's all kinds of topics. And then a recording will be available of this session, and so keep an eye out again on that iacac.org for the recording later on. So panelists, you have 45 minutes. If we hit the 45 minutes, I will hop back on just to keep us on time, but otherwise I will pass things on over to you.
Thank you so much. Welcome to the myth-busting college admission session. I think all of us are really excited to share with you some of the things that we have heard, rumors of rumors. Sometimes it's what you heard from a friend's older brother or your parents' friend's sister. And so we're here to set things straight. So let's get started, guys. You are on mute, Scott.
I forgot I did that. So my name is Scott Carlson. I am one of the Chicago Regional Admission Counselors for the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. I cover primarily the northern and western suburbs of Chicago, and I am a regional located up here in the Chicagoland area.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Megan O'Rourke. I'm the Associate Dean and Coordinator for Midwest Recruitment at Providence College in Providence, Rhode Island. But I, like Scott, am also based in the Chicagoland area. I live in Oak Park and work with students from all of the Midwest. So excited to be here with all of you tonight.
You guys hit the regional jackpot. My name is Courtney Wallace. I'm the Director of Admissions for the Chicago region. I am locally based in Chicagoland, a neighbor of Megan's in Oak Park, from Augustana in Rock Island, Illinois. So those of you that are from the Chicago area or the Midwest that are on the call tonight, we're probably one of the people that you'll be working with. So to get started, Scott, please help us bust this myth. Taking regular classes and getting an A is better than taking an honors, an AP or IB course and getting a B.
Yeah, so this is definitely a myth and it's false. We all go to really good high schools here in the Chicagoland area that are offering many different AP, IB, honors, even dual credit options at your high school. And we want to make sure you're taking advantage of what your high school has to offer. If you're getting straight A's in all regular courses, we're going to wonder, why did you never challenge yourself? Why did you never try to take that step and see how you did? If you're getting a mixture of A's and B's, then you're doing a good amount of rigor for yourself. Once you start dropping into those C's, that's when we say really drop down that rigor a little bit so you can get back up in those A to B ranges, but never worry about what Johnny next door is like taking for rigor wise. If he's doing 5 APs, you do not need to be in 5 APs. Do what is a healthy amount of rigor for yourself, and that'll look good for you in the admission process. And then Megan, I heard that senior year grades don't matter.
So hopefully you all are going to start to see there's a pattern to some of the things that we're talking about. And as we go through these slides, know that these are the most common myths that Courtney, Scott, and I have run across in all of our years of admission. And this one comes up a lot, this idea of senior grades not mattering. It's definitely a myth, and it's also false. I think the thing that's important to understand when we talk about academic review and kind of your overall academic record is when you apply to college, you're applying with your freshman year grades, your sophomore year grades, and your junior year grades. So when Courtney, Scott, or I sit down and review your application, that's what we're looking at, right? We can see all of the other parts of the application, activities, the essay, letters of rec, anything like that. But the main kind of component, and especially now in a time where a lot of schools have moved away from requiring an ACT or an SAT score, your academic record really is kind of the focal point of the application in terms of your quantitative info. So when we sit down to look at those grades, we're looking for a number of different things. Scott just mentioned one of the big ones. What kinds of classes are you taking versus what's been offered at your high school? But more importantly, the grades that you're receiving in these classes. How are you doing? Are you able to manage and handle the challenge of taking some honors classes, maybe taking honors and AP or honors and IB? The kind of balance of these things in combination with any trends that might be present. So maybe freshman year was a little bit of a struggle, but junior year, you've kind of like made it through and you've hit your stride. That's great. That's all that we have to go on when you sit down and look at an application. We can see the classes that you are taking as a senior. You do include that as part of your application, but there are no grades, right? Because you're in the middle of first semester senior year when you're doing this. So I think the thing to recognize is that the farther you get along in the process, you get accepted to a school and you're deciding this is where I'd like to go. The school is going to require you to submit your transcript with your senior year grades on it. Counselors like Courtney, Scott, and I then take a look at those senior year grades. So our hope is that the trends that we saw in those first few years just translate directly into senior year. But something that Courtney, Scott, and I have all seen in our time in admissions is students' senioritis kicks in a lot. And what we then have to do as admission staff members is figure out, looking at what we're looking at, is this student still going to be a good candidate for coming to our school that fall? And in some instances, admission decisions can be rescinded. I think it's really important to point that out, not as a reason to scare you, but just understand that senior year is as important as the other years. It's just, it takes a little bit longer for that review process to occur. So, Courtney, got another myth for you. This one is related to kind of activities and involvement. So the myth that we come across is I should join as many activities as possible to show that I'm super involved. What say you?
This is definitely a myth. You should join the activities that really make you excited and really fill you up. We want to make sure that you are active and engaged in those activities that make sense for you. I think we all think about, and I think college admissions folks in general talk a lot about being well-rounded, and you don't necessarily have to be well-rounded. One of our colleagues says you can be well lopsided and things can turn out just fine. So we also want to see some depth in some of those activities. We're learning about you through your list of activities, and you don't have to just, we can see through it when you have just joined activities just to add those to your resume. So be involved in the things that you're super passionate about and show us where your interests lie. Don't just get involved in things just to get involved with them. So Scott, do I have to do community service to be admitted to college?
No, you do not. So no, there's a big myth there that we all hope that obviously that you are all great people, but you don't need community service to be admissible to any one of our universities. It's another great thing to add into your application though regarding your extracurricular activities. That's another thing you can add in there. If you are doing any sort of community service, like volunteer work, if you're doing any sort of mentoring or tutoring, like all those things are great things to add in there, but it's not needed. If you're more like Courtney was saying, that you're more of a lopsided involvement, maybe you're heavily involved in athletics. I had a student this past year who was a really big soccer player. He's on a big travel athletic team. He played for his high school's team. He also coached a little league team, and then he even was a referee. Like, he's doing a lot of involvement. It's all heavily one-sided. He didn't have time to do community service, and that's okay. You don't need that to be admissible to any university. As long as you're doing something, you're getting involved, that's what we want to see in the admission process. Megan, I hear that colleges are looking for reasons to deny me.
Students, you're probably wondering about this one, and we were thinking about how to include this in a way and be able to talk about it in a way that makes sense for you all, because I think this is like a very prevalent thing. Because when you read the papers, you see schools that have percentages of students that they're admitting that are, you know, under 10%. But generally speaking, this is a myth. And it's one of those things that when you look at schools like Augustana or like the University of Illinois or like Providence, there is a level of competitiveness with regards to admission, but ultimately we work in the office of admission, not in the office of denial. And so our job as admission counselors is to help build a group of students that become the class of 2025, right? And so what will be the class of 2025. And so our goal is to try to look at the different parts of your application to find reasons to admit you. Now, there are exceptions to this for sure. When you talk about the Ivy League kind of level schools, they do have a pretty low admit rate. But ultimately know that there's stuff that you can control in this process, and by presenting your best self, that's really all that anyone can ask in the process. And there are going to be plenty of schools like ours, R3, and plenty of thousands of schools across the country that would love to have you as a future student. So, Courtney, I'm wondering what you think about this myth, that I don't need to visit a school until after I'm admitted. What do you think?
I think it's definitely a myth, and I think we can always add in, I don't need to visit or I don't need to engage virtually with a school until after I'm admitted.
Good call. Yeah.
We know that things are different right now in the world that we're living in, but it's still important that you're engaging with the colleges that you're really interested in. It might be that you're engaging with them and then you decide, no, I don't want to apply to that school. It's a great school, but it's not a great fit for you. And you only find those things out by actually engaging. And maybe you are able to visit the school and you find out, wow, this is like a great place for me, or nope, this isn't the best place for me. So if you wait until after you're admitted, some schools are going to be giving you decisions, here shortly. Some it's going to be after the new year. Some schools don't release decisions until April, and then the candidate reply date is May 1st. So if you wait, you're just causing yourself much more stress. So please make sure that you're engaging all throughout your senior year, certainly, but it's not too early for those of you that are juniors or sophomores that are on tonight to start engaging. Maybe it's looking at social media content. Maybe it's doing an online info session with that college or university that you're interested in. Maybe it's just talking to students that you know that are at that college or university. Maybe it's talking to alumni. There's great ways to engage, even if you're not able to visit in person.
Can I make one caveat to this? As the faraway school on this panel tonight, I will say that there are some students like at Providence that decide to not visit until after they've been admitted. And I think in some instances that's certainly okay. But given the times that we're in, I think a lot of colleges and universities, like Courtney said, have adjusted to providing online programming. And so I think no engagement at all is not the right answer. So maybe taking advantage of some of those virtual things, or just a chat with the admission counselor from the area and then making a trip to campus, I think makes a lot of sense. I think you can certainly wait, and we have those students because it is a plane ride and there might be some financial components to that. but you have to be able to feel like you're making the right decision and not too stressed. And I think the way that you do that is like preparing as early as you can.
Yeah,
And
I was
in
going to
this,
say too.
Oh,
Oh, sorry. I was going to
go
say too
ahead.
that with the a lot of schools use demonstrated interest too as part of their admission review, and so by you interacting with us at our high school visits, at like a virtual college fair that we're doing, all these sorts of things right now, just emailing an admission counselor, that all gets put in your file. And if it's a school that heavily weighs demonstrated interest for an admission decision, you don't want that to hurt you in the admission process. Now, demonstrated interest is not emailing us asking for a free T-shirt. You want to make sure it's good quality demonstrated interest, like asking us a question about our university or the admission process.
good point.
Yeah.
And I think if there are silver linings in what's happening right now, it's putting everyone on a more equal, well, in the college search, whether it's you're looking at a school that's farther away or in your backyard, on a more equal playing field in regards to travel. And so Megan's absolutely right. It might be that you didn't have the money to travel even a state over, and maybe you wouldn't have normally visited until later if you were really sure about the school. So engagement is really key.
Mm-hmm.
So Scott, right?
Yep.
I need to apply to 20 schools.
No, please do not do that to yourself. That is so many schools you're applying to. I always say that a really good number is between 4 to 9. You really don't want to get into those double digits there, because that's just a lot of schools you're applying to. That's also a lot of money, because you have to pay application fees usually for each of those universities, ranges anywhere between like $30 to $70. And that's a lot of money if you're doing that to 10 different schools right there. So I always say there are 3 tiers of what you should be looking at. You have on the bottom tier, you have your likely schools. These are schools where you are either above or at the top end of what's called their academic profile. An academic profile is what all schools will utilize. It shows you the mid 50 percentile of where students scored last year's admission cycle. So it's like, okay, the mid 50% of their students who were admitted scored between a 3.4 and a 3.8 GPA. Their ACT were between this scores and their SATs were between these scores. That way you can see like, okay, this is where the middle 50% score, but don't freak out, because that means 25% of the admitted students scored above these ranges and 25% of these students scored below these ranges. But it gives you a really good idea to see where you stand versus last year's class, because it's not going to change too drastically between last year's. Are usually around the same admit profile year over year. So that's where you will say the likely schools, you want to apply anywhere between 1 to 3 likely schools where you're either above the range or on the top end of it. Then you have your target schools. These are schools where you're right in the middle or towards the higher end of their academic profile. You have a really good chance to being admitted to these types of universities. And that's 2 to 3 schools. And then you have your reach schools. This is 1 to 3 applications here. And these are schools where you're either on the really bottom end or maybe slightly below their mid 50 percentile admit profile. And so it's not a slam dunk they're going to be admitted, but there's still a decent chance that you could be admitted to that university. So when you add it all up, that's anywhere between 4 to 9. I think that's just a really good applicant pool to decide on. And no matter what, you don't need to apply for like a backup. You don't need that many backups. Like, make sure all schools you're applying to that you love that school. And if you get admitted, be excited about that. You don't need, and sorry if there are any parents in here, you don't need to apply where your parents went. Like, if you have no interest, it doesn't fit you at all, like, it's completely fine to not apply there. But 4 to 9 schools is a perfect range for schools where you're getting admitted to. You should usually get admitted to at least then 3 to 5 schools in there. And that gives you a good pool to decide between on where should I go for my next year. Megan, I hear the more highly selective schools that I apply to, the better chance I have of getting admitted into one of them. What do you think?
I would say that this is a myth, and here's why. And this is just advice. You know, Courtney, Scott, and I have worked with students who've applied to Ivy League or Ivy League kind of level of competitiveness type schools. We've worked with students throughout our careers that are looking at places like this. My piece of advice to you as a student is those places, when you talk about schools that have a 10% admit rate or an 8% admit rate, they have a lot of applicants and not a lot of spots. So there's a lot of decision making that goes into selecting a class of what they need out of that class. So you might be the perfect applicant. I have a colleague whose son's friend was a student that had a perfect ACT, a perfect SAT. She was, captain of of a team at school, an athletic team at school. She did some academic things at school. Like, she just had like a great resume, perfect resume, obviously perfect test scores, great GPA. Like, on paper, there's nothing else more that you can ask from this student. And she applied to 3, 4 of the kind of Ivy League type schools and was denied at 2, waitlisted at 1. Maybe it was only 3. So denied at 2 and waitlisted at 1. At that point, there's nothing else that we can ask of that student in terms of putting together kind of the perfect representation of what like every school wants out of a candidate. Now, ironically, the last place that she applied to, like the 5th school in her pool of applications, Scott, she followed your advice, was that she applied to the University of Illinois because they have the #1 computer science program in the country or the world. You can correct me on that.
It's number 5.
Number 5, sorry. I'm just blowing you guys up, trying to give you if we have any computer science people in the room, number 5 in the country. So we're talking about a really highly rated program. And she found after visiting, like, oh, this is the right place for me. I don't want to spend too much more time on this, but I will say this, that you can do the best that you can do, present your best application, but also make sure that you're finding schools that match up with what you want to do, what your goals are, what you want to accomplish, and how is that school going to provide those things to you. That's not to say you can't apply to all of them. If you want to do that, go right ahead. But know that you as a candidate, you're no less than where you were when you started if the decisions that you hear back aren't ideal. Because ultimately, you're going to find a place that's going to take care of you and want you just as you are, as this great student who's going to be a future member of that community. So, Courtney, that got a little sappy. We're going to move into another sort of related application question. Myth number however many we're on now. I will be disadvantaged when colleges read my application as a result of lower grades or not being able to participate in stuff because we're virtual, or what have you, or activities maybe just aren't happening because of the pandemic.
We absolutely know that this is beyond your control. You will not be disadvantaged in the application process because of lower grades or lack of participation during this pandemic, whether that be last spring, whether it be this fall, and hopefully then this is over. Now, I think it's important, and this is happening at our colleges too. We know that students aren't performing at their top level because they're learning remotely, or they've got stuff happening at home, or they're learning beside their kid brother, kid sister, and it's loud, and their parents are also working from home. So please understand that admissions folks know that this is not easy for anyone, and we don't want you to be nervous about being disadvantaged. What I'll say as a caveat is that it needs to make sense, though. And so it could be that if there is a really severe drop or a really big change, it could be that we might reach out to you and ask what happened, and that really is a positive thing if we're reaching out, because we know that something's off. You might know this year that the Common App and a lot of colleges and universities are offering the opportunity for students to talk about the community disruption or the disruption that maybe happened in their households, where maybe education just wasn't on the top of the docket. Maybe it was because a family member was really sick. Maybe you were really sick. So you're and certainly activities, we know that this is something that is totally beyond your control. And it's happening not only within the United States with high school students, it's happening in elementary schools, but it's also happening to our current college students. So those students who are applying to med school and we're planning to do research or planning to go on a study abroad trip, and none of that is happening. Like, this is definitely much bigger than just the college application process for undergraduates. So please hear us when we say you will not be disadvantaged during this process. Scott, I've been offered a roster spot on the college's varsity team to play for your team. So I'm in, right? I don't need to apply.
Yeah, this is always 100% false. You still have to apply and be admitted to our university. There are a lot of NCAA academic standards that you have to meet to be admissible. I have seen so many students, especially it's usually more so highlighted amongst the football players, who they get recruited, they're a verbal commit, everyone's super excited to have them, but then they end up not meeting the academic standards for that university, and then they have to go to a community college for a year or 2 years to kind of raise their grades, and then re-go through the recruitment process again. Or if they're lucky, they could have stayed in touch with the coach, and the coach could have reserved a spot for them eventually when they get their grades up enough to be able to be admissible to university to join. So yes, you still have to be admissible for all to our universities, and you still have to apply to our university for admission. Yes, there are usually a little bit lower standards because we know that you have a lot on your plate with being a varsity recruited athlete, but at the end of the day, you still have to be admissible and follow those NCAA academic standards. If I write a killer essay and crush the ACT / SAT, will it counter my low grades, Megan?
This is a myth, Scott. Unfortunately, for some of you out there that are maybe thinking this might help you kind of balance the scales, here's what we'll tell you. We publish kind of average academic profile for our students. That's a good indicator of whether or not you're a good academic fit for our institution. Many schools this year went test optional, meaning they are not requiring or no longer requiring, at least for this year, or maybe permanently, the ACT or the SAT. Really, when it comes down to it, the single greatest predictor of academic success in college is your academic success as a high school student. So in that capacity, while you might write a great essay and that might help you in your review of a second read or a committee kind of environment, you might submit an ACT or an SAT. That would probably even be lower on a scale. Like in my instance, I think I would be more inclined to like, this student really wrote a really compelling essay versus a test score. Those things are not going to outweigh in most cases the academic record for a student. So Courtney, if I've never heard of a school, it can't be a good one. So tell me what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've now worked in higher education. Well, the combined group of us has been working in higher education for about 60 years. And I'm sure that there are plenty of colleges, really awesome colleges and universities that none of us have ever heard of before. So a lot of the schools that a lot of people have heard of are bigger, and it might be the ones that are in your backyard. And so while they still might be great schools, it doesn't mean that a school on the other side of the country, for example, in Providence, Rhode Island, couldn't be a really great fit for you. And we in college admissions and your high school counselors, probably you hear us talk about the best fit. And so the best fit is such a personal thing. Megan was mentioning earlier to Scott about, the fact that their computer science is the top 5 program in the nation. And so while that could be true, but what if you're a student who is looking for a small school or looking for a school on the coast? Does that mean that it's not a good school for you? So just because you've never heard of it doesn't mean that students don't go on to do really amazing things. And so just making sure that you're paying attention to all the things that college or university has to offer, and making sure that you're asking your question of all of the colleges. And if your question is answered, and maybe it's at a school that you've never heard of before, or your friends or your family have never heard of, it doesn't mean that it's not the best fit for you, and it doesn't mean that it's not a good one. There are like 4,000 colleges in the United States, so there's plenty of great ones. Scott, my application will be taken more seriously if I submit 5 letters of recommendation instead of the required 2. What do you think?
So the college application itself, when we have you guys fill it out, one of the biggest things we like to see is, can you follow instructions? And so this right here, I would say usually it's the letters of recommendations by far the biggest point of, can you follow the instructions? We ask you guys for, usually at a university, when people are asking for it, it's usually like one counselor letter of rec and it's one teacher letter of rec. That's usually the two that they're asking for. Sometimes they have an optional third, but that's all they're asking for. I always have the one horror story when I was on a panel with the University of Notre Dame where they always ask for two, and there's an optional third, and a student sent in 85 letters of recommendation. That is a huge red flag. One, how do you know that many people? And two, how do you get that many people to write you a letter of recommendation? We're all wondering, what's wrong with you now? Like, why do you have this many letters of rec coming in? So please follow the instructions. And if you ever want to do more than what is being required, call the admission counselor, email the admission counselor, ask, because we are, like I said, we're all looking for ways to admit you. We never want to steer you wrong. Ask us first, and we'll let you know if it's a good idea or a bad idea to do this. And I would say, but along the lines of letters of rec, if you're at a bigger school, which I know a lot of the Chicago suburb schools are a little bit bigger, and sometimes you don't know your counselor that well, or they may not know you that well, prepare like a little resume that you can give them. That way, when they're writing your letter of recommendation, they have some good key talking points that they can add into your response. And a great question, if you're looking to get some good, like, demonstrated interest with a college, if they're requiring a letter of recommendation from a teacher, ask them if they'd rather have a teacher that knows you best or a teacher that's related to your academic interest area. That's a really good question to ask a college, and they'll be able to let you know which one they would rather prefer that you have send in. And that could be a great way to get your foot into a door with talking to an admission counselor. But yes, always do what they're required, follow the instructions, and before you do anything that's more so, ask the admission counselor for that college first.
Can I add something really quickly? From someone who reads letters of recommendation, it's also really uncommon that there's more than two, if there's more than two letters, that it's telling us anything new. So if the folks that are writing your letters, even if you're required to send one and you can send another additional one, if it's not telling us anything new, it's not adding value to your application.
Megan, I have nothing traumatic to write about for my essay. I'm doomed, aren't I?
So this is an easy one. Obviously, this is a myth. We've got a few more slides, so I'm going to keep this one short. But some of the best essays, and a lot of the best essays that I've read, are about simply mundane, run-of-the-mill, day-to-day types of topics. So if you want to be funny, be funny. If you have a sincere passion for something, share that with us. Be authentic. You can't go wrong, regardless of the topic. Okay, Courtney. Deadlines aren't a big deal. No worries.
Totally not a big deal. Just kidding. Deadlines, I think, are one of the most important parts of the application process. If you miss an early action deadline, if you miss a scholarship deadline, it's possible that you wouldn't even, that you're not going to be considered for that program, like for example, for early action or early decision. And it's also possible that you could lose out on thousands of dollars just because you submitted your application 24 hours after the deadline or 24 hours later. And oftentimes, even though college admissions people want to give you a break, sometimes it's totally out of their control. So for example, if my college has an early action deadline of November 1st, which it does, Common App will turn off the ability for you to apply as of 11:59. So even if I wanted to allow you to apply early action on November 2nd, I couldn't. It's totally out of my control. And even if I wanted to give you additional scholarship money, even though you missed the deadline, again, it's out of my control because these are processes, and you just don't want to miss out on something as big as a deadline to college or for scholarships or for the FAFSA. Scott, I need to know my major before I apply to or select a college. This is a must, right?
No, this is completely false. Yeah, with U of I especially, I think this is a good example of my university, because in our application, we are one of the few universities I would say out there that are kind of like admitting you straight into a program that you want to be admitted into. But if you're not, you want to major in, that is 100% completely fine. By far, at our campus as well, I would say most college campuses out there, the most popular major usually amongst the freshman class every year is their version of undecided, exploratory, open, for us, a division of general studies. Like, it's meant for, that's what college is meant for. At most college, students are changing their major at least 2 to 3 times while they're there. So it's completely fine if you're not sure you want to major in just yet. Those departments for the students who are undecided have so much advising for the students that they help them out to figure out where is the best fit for them on that campus. So no, you do not need to know your major, especially for U of I, just like for Providence and Augustana. You'll be completely fine coming in undecided and navigating your path with the help of our advisement. Megan, I hear that your school is too much money for me. What do you have to say about that?
This is one that definitely continues on in terms of the myths of college admissions. So I think one of the most important things to point out is there's been a study done between public schools and private schools and the average debt that a student incurs kind of at the end of everything. And there's a $10,000 difference between a private school and a public school graduate in terms of the amount of debt. Given the amount that a private school, the sticker price, the kind of all in, you would think it would be more, but it's not. Many private schools offer great scholarships, financial aid packages, you know, with grants, loans, student work study, all of those things. And so I think for you all, as you're considering schools, I wouldn't write a school off of the list just because the sticker price is high. In many instances, those schools can provide kind of an overall package, including both merit and need, that gets you pretty close to what you might be paying to attend an in-state school. So keep everything on the table, do your research, and you'll find lots of places, public and private, that can provide you great experiences at a pretty affordable rate for your family. Okay, Courtney, we're not going to qualify for financial aid, so there's no reason for us to fill out the FAFSA.
So if you decide not to file the FAFSA, or you decide not to file the alternative application if you're unable to file the FAFSA, you're basically telling that college or university that you can write a check for the full amount to attend. And if that's the case, hey, that's your prerogative. But if you are at all interested in need-based assistance, you want to make sure that you fill it out, even if maybe you didn't receive, even if you had an older sibling that maybe didn't receive any need-based aid. Every college and university is a little bit different, and everybody's financial situation at a different time is different as well. The other reason, there's 2 more reasons why you should think about filing the FAFSA. No matter what, even if your family makes $5 million a year or they make $5 a year, every student's eligible for a federal loan their freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior year. So that's reason enough. And then the last one is if something were to happen to maybe a parent would lose a job, maybe someone would be unable to work, it's so important that you already have the FAFSA on file. The last thing that you and your family are going to want to do in a stressful time, like when someone loses a job or someone gets sick, is to fill out a governmental form. So it's great to just always have that on file. And then if you have to make adjustments, make that small adjustment versus filling it out from the beginning.
Yeah, if this pass year proved anything is possible. So have that.
100%, Scott.
Yeah.
Isn't that the truth? Like, so
that's like the theme for 2020. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yes. So this is our last one. We're so glad that you're able to join us tonight. We hope that you learned some things. Our last one is posting pictures on social media featuring poor judgment on my part won't have any impact on my admission to college.
I can say this enough that, like, it's not even just posting pictures. Like, you really need to be careful in all facets of social media, especially the biggest one I would say is past year for me that I've gotten been Snapchat and Instagram. So
yes,
up those Instagram stories, or you're putting in your Snapchat stories, people are taking screenshots of those, or your Snapchat group chats. Like, people are taking screenshots. I had several get sent to me, and I had to forward them on to our public affairs they were the ones who decide what they do, those types of things. But like, this happens. Like you can see here, Marquette rescinded an offer of admission to a lacrosse player. So not even just a regular student, an athlete who was coming to their university. They completely just rescinded the offer of admission. Like, you really need to be careful what's happening out there. Things are being screenshotted and sent to universities now.
I think that's such an interesting, it's, you know, because I grew up in a time where social media was just beginning. So like some of the things that happen, like the silly things that happen in college aren't documented in the same way that they are now. And I think life in general is documented to a so much higher of a degree than at any point it ever before. And I think being aware of the fact that like you could be recorded, you could be on camera, like this is not solely private information anymore in a lot of different ways. It's a hard lesson for these students to learn, but unfortunately, you know, this is one example of many that happened over the spring and summer of this year. So, Court.
And I would just say it's usually not college admissions officers going on and searching your social media sites. Like, we have better things to do than search. It's usually when, as Scott mentioned earlier, it's a parent of your classmate, or it's another student in your grade who knows that you've been accepted to our college or university, then they're sending it to us. And so that's so savage in a way. But it's not normally like our organic searching that finds this stuff. It's
Right.
Other people in your community typically that end up alerting us to these things.
And in the instance that I personally dealt with, it was another student reporting about another student and being kind of horrified about the situation, and rightfully so. So I think we just all have to be aware of what we decide to put out there for public consumption in a lot of ways.
And you're right, Megan, in these situations, it's so rightfully so, but some of it is not necessarily the student maybe hasn't even done anything wrong, but they're but the picture could make it look like something is about to happen or did happen. And you just see this one snapshot in time. So don't put yourself in a situation where it can come back and haunt you.
So we've got a few minutes for questions. I know that we've covered a lot of different topics tonight. Are there things that you all are wondering that you want to ask us? We're happy to answer anything that you might have in the way of a question or just a thought or something that you're maybe nervous about. Let us know. Pop that into the Q&A. And if not, that's okay too. Yep, here's us. You can contact us directly at our institutions, and we'd be happy to answer questions for you there. And we've all been doing this long enough that we can share kind of our experiences and our knowledge, not just about our own schools, but kind of beyond the scope of our specific or respective institutions. We've all worked for multiple schools in our careers, so I think that helps in just having a broader understanding of the process in general. It doesn't look like there's any questions, so we hope that you were able to kind of get a lot out of this evening, and we're so glad that you were able to join us. I'm going to pass it back over to Isabel.
Yeah, all right. Thank you everybody for logging on for tonight's session. I am going to steal the screen here for just one more slide. So just a couple of reminders. There will be a quick survey. So after you close out of the session, just a very quick 4-question survey will pop up. Please take just a couple minutes to fill that out just so we know how we can better provide programming in the future. As a reminder, there are plenty of more sessions that you can sign up for to learn about everything college and admissions. And then recordings as well as all of those extra sessions will be available on IACAC.org. So make sure you peruse that site, see the sessions you want to sign up for, and view those recordings if you missed anything or have to pass it along to someone who would benefit from the information. But otherwise, thank you everybody for coming. Thank you panelists for sharing your wisdom. And we hope to see you again at a future session.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.
Bye.